The morning fog hung heavy over Coronado Naval Base as Isabel Morrison arrived at the shooting range for what had become her daily ritual. At 29, she moved with the careful precision of someone who had learned to make herself invisible in crowded spaces. Her sandy blonde hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her clothes were deliberately unremarkable. Worn jeans and a faded gray hoodie that had seen better days. The only thing that stood out was the careful way she cradled her right hand, white medical wrapping visible beneath her sleeve. She had been coming here for 3 months now, always arriving exactly 45 minutes before the range officially opened. Thanks to a special arrangement with the facility manager, the rehabilitation program for injured veterans allowed her access during off hours. Though she had never specified the exact nature of her service or injury, the paperwork simply listed her as I. Morrison, medical discharge, physical therapy authorization. Most people assumed she had been some kind of support personnel, maybe a mechanic or communication specialist who had gotten hurt in a vehicle accident. She never corrected them. The range was her sanctuary, the one place where the trembling in her right hand seemed to calm, where the nightmares that clawed at her sleep could not reach. She had developed a routine: arrive early, clean her rifle with methodical precision, using her left hand while her right remained mostly still, then practice her breathing exercises while other shooters began to filter in. Bill Crawford, the range safety officer and weathered former Marine, had grown accustomed to her quiet presence. He watched her from his office window as she laid out her equipment with textbook precision, each item positioned for maximum efficiency. The rifle she cleaned was not some off-the-shelf sporting weapon. It was a heavily customized precision platform, the kind of setup that cost more than most people's cars. Strange one, that girl, Crawford muttered to himself, noting how she flinched slightly when someone dropped a heavy ammunition box nearby. But there was something about the way she handled her weapon that nagged at him. Too precise, too ingrained. To be self-taught. And that ear protection she wore was not standard civilian gear. The small symbol etched into the side was barely visible, but Crawford had seen it before, though he could not quite place where dot. As Isabel settled into her first shooting position of the day, her advanced medical monitoring devices came online. Professional-grade biometric sensors tracked nerve responses and muscle recovery patterns in real time during firearms training. The rehabilitation program had spared no expense in providing cutting-edge technology to help injured veterans regain their capabilities. The sensors were nearly invisible. Thin strips adhered to her forearm beneath the bandages, feeding data to a small device clipped to her belt. What nobody at the range knew was that 3 months ago, her right hand had been completely paralyzed. The nerve damage from embedded shrapnel had been so severe that 3 different surgeons had told her she would never regain full function. Yet here she was, slowly but steadily proving them wrong, one careful shot at a time. Today should have been no different, except for the rumble of engines approaching the range entrance. 2 black SUVs pulled up just after 7 in the morning, their presence immediately changing the atmosphere of the usually casual civilian range. The doors opened and 8 men emerged, moving with the controlled energy of apex predators, temporarily caged by peacetime training requirements. They wore standard military fatigues, but something about their bearing screamed elite special operations. Leading them was Lieutenant Jake Sullivan, whose squared shoulders and perpetual scowl suggested he viewed any moment not spent in active combat as a personal insult. Behind him, the rest of the team unloaded their gear with practiced efficiency: rifle cases, spotting scopes, and enough ammunition to supply a small war. Civilians on deck. Petty Officer Raymond Diaz muttered to his teammate as he noticed Isabel at the far end of the range. Why do they let tourists play soldier on military property? Sullivan's eyes swept over her dismissively, taking in bandaged hand, and the way she had flinched when they slammed their vehicle doors. Probably some dependent living out her warrior fantasy while her husband's deployed. Ignore her. But Chief Petty Officer Marcus Hawthorne, older and more observant than his younger teammates, noticed something the others missed. The way she had laid out her equipment was not random. It was textbook perfect. And the rifle she was cleaning was not some sporting weapon. It was a precision instrument, customized beyond military standard. As the SEALs set up their equipment. On lanes 15 through 20, their dismissive comments continued to flow. They were not meant to be cruel exactly, just the casual arrogance of elite operators who had forgotten what it was like to be vulnerable. Diaz made jokes about weekend warriors trying to play with the professionals. Another team member wondered aloud if she even knew which end of the rifle to point downrange. Their laughter carried across the range, sharp and careless. Isabel heard every word. She had learned long ago that the best response to mockery was silence. So she continued her preparations methodically, loading a single round into her rifle, never more than one at a time during rehab. Doctor's orders. What the SEALs did not know was that they were about to witness something that would shatter their understanding of what was possible with a precision rifle. As Isabel settled into her first shooting position, her right hand trembled violently. She paused, laying her palm flat on the shooting mat, her lips moving in what looked like a quiet mantra. Then she placed her eye to the scope and fired. The bullet struck dead, center at 500 yards. Not unusual by itself, but the way she had fired, no hesitation, no drift, just a perfect trigger break, despite the visible tremor in her wrapped hand, made Crawford lean forward in his chair. She worked the bolt with her left hand, another oddity, and loaded a second round. This time, she shifted position entirely, rolling onto her right side in a way that looked even more awkward than her first stance. The SEAL's mockery grew louder. "Someone should tell her this isn't yoga class," Sullivan commented. "You're supposed to shoot the target, not do interpretive dance at it." The second shot cracked out. Another perfect center hit, then a third from yet another unconventional position. Every shot was perfect. Every position was wrong by conventional standards. And every movement spoke of training so deeply ingrained it had become instinct. In his office, Crawford felt his chest tighten. He knew now why that ear protection symbol had seemed familiar. He reached for his secure phone, fingers trembling slightly as he dialed a number he had not called in years. "Master Chief Cross? It's Bill Crawford at Coronado Range. I think you need to get down here. We might have a problem." 20 minutes later, Master Chief Benjamin Cross arrived at the range. At 45, he moved with the careful precision of someone who had survived too many close calls to waste motion on unnecessary swagger. His presence immediately changed the dynamic among the younger SEALs. Spines straightened, casual chatter died away, and Sullivan's perpetual scowl deepened into something approaching professional focus. Cross surveyed the range with experienced eyes, his gaze lingering on the lone woman at lane 5. Something about her posture nagged at him, a familiar set to her shoulders that he could not quite place. He had seen thousands of shooters over his 25-year career, could usually peg their skill level within seconds of watching them handle a weapon, but this one was different. She moved like water, fluid, controlled, never wasting energy on unnecessary motion. As he watched her prepare for another shot, that same impossible precision, despite her obvious injury, a cold realization, began to form in his mind. The specialized positions, the custom equipment, that symbol on her ear protection. But Crawford had been right to notice. Cross had seen it before, on equipment requisitions for a unit that officially never existed. Phantom Unit, the military's most elite sniper program. 8 operators selected from across all branches, trained to levels that redefined what was possible with a precision rifle. They had been legends in the special operations community until Syria, until the mission that went so catastrophically wrong that the entire program was scrapped and classified beyond even his clearance level. But if his suspicions were correct, then Isabel Morrison was not just some injured veteran working through physical therapy. She was something far more dangerous, far more broken, and far more valuable than any of them could have imagined. And judging by the way Sullivan was now strutting toward her with predatory confidence, they were all about to learn exactly how dangerous underestimating the quiet ones could be. "Excuse me, miss," Sullivan called out as he approached lane 5, his voice carrying the condescending friendliness of someone who had never met a challenge he could not conquer. Up close, he could see the fine scars along Isabel's jawline, the kind that came from high-velocity fragments rather than anything accidental. But he was too focused on his own superiority to process the implications. Isabel looked up from her rifle, her gray eyes calm and unreadable. She had been expecting this moment since the SEALs arrived. Elite operators rarely could resist the urge to assert dominance, especially when they perceived weakness. "My team and I were wondering if you would like some pointers," Sullivan continued with that same patronizing smile. "I noticed your form is a bit unconventional. Might help with that shake in your hand if you use proper fundamentals." Behind him, the other SEALs had gathered, their gear forgotten as they sensed entertainment approaching. Diaz wore a smirk. That suggested he was already composing the story he would tell later about the civilian who thought she could outshoot Navy SEALs. "I appreciate the offer," Isabel replied quietly, her voice carrying a slight rasp as if she did not use it often. "But I'm just following my physical therapy routine." "Physical therapy?" Sullivan's smile widened. "Well, that explains the creative positions. But seriously, you're developing bad habits that will be hard to break later. How about a friendly wager to help motivate you to improve?" Master Chief Cross, who had been watching the interaction unfold from his position near the range office, felt his jaw tighten. He had seen this play out before. Young operators drunk on their own reputation, unable to recognize when they were about to step on a landmine. "What kind of challenge?" Isabel asked, and something in her tone made Hawthorne glance nervously at Cross. There was an edge there that had not been present before, like steel wrapped in silk. Sullivan sensed what he mistook for capitulation. Simple. 5 shots at 800 yards. Closest group wins. Loser buys coffee for the winner's whole team. I'll even give you a handicap for that hand injury. The word handicap hung in the air like a physical blow. Isabel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, and when she spoke again, her voice carried an edge that made every experienced shooter on the range lean forward. "One condition," she said. "We shoot at 1,000 yards instead." The range went quiet. Even the SEALs stopped their chatter to stare. 1,000 yards was serious distance. The kind where wind reading became as important as marksmanship, where even slight errors compounded into complete misses. It was the kind of distance that separated professionals from pretenders. Sullivan laughed, but it sounded forced. "Ma'am, I don't think you understand. That's almost 2/3 of a mile. With that hand tremor, you'd be lucky to hit the target." "Frame, are you refusing?" Isabel asked mildly. His face flushed. "Of course not. Your funeral lady." As they prepared for the challenge, Diaz sidled up to Cross. "Master Chief, look at her gear," he whispered urgently. "That ear protection, that symbol. I saw it in Afghanistan on equipment we weren't supposed to talk about." Cross nodded grimly. "I know what you're thinking, Diaz, and you're going to keep thinking it quietly. Understood?" The younger man swallowed hard. "But Master Chief, if she's who I think, then Sullivan's about to learn a very expensive lesson about assumptions." Crawford appeared at Cross's shoulder, his weathered face grim. "Master Chief, I made some calls. That girl's paperwork. It's flagged at levels I've never seen before. Classification so deep it makes Black Ops look transparent. How deep? Cross asked, though he was beginning to suspect he already knew. Phantom deep, Crawford whispered. The wind had picked up, gusting to 15 miles per hour from the west. At 1,000 yards, that would push a bullet significantly off course. Sullivan took his position first, making a show of checking wind flags and adjusting his scope. It was good, very good. His 5 shots landed in a group that could be covered by a softball. Impressive shooting by any standard. Beat that, he said smugly as he stood up. And don't feel bad when you can't. This is what we do for a living. But instead of taking a traditional prone position, Isabel did something that made every experienced shooter on the range lean forward. She set up 3 targets in a line, each separated by exactly 2 feet. "What are you doing?" Sullivan asked, his confidence wavering slightly. The bet was for group size, not multiple targets. "I'm giving you a chance to withdraw," Isabel replied evenly. 1 shot, 3 targets, all or nothing. The SEALs erupted in disbelief. Hitting 3 aligned targets with 1 bullet at 1,000 yards was not just difficult. It was virtually impossible. The bullet would have to maintain perfect stability through all 3 impacts, something that defied physics and probability. "You're serious?" Hawthorne breathed. Isabel did not answer. Instead, she closed her eyes for exactly 10 seconds, her lips moving in that same quiet rhythm Cross had noticed earlier. When she opened them, something fundamental had changed. The tremor in her hand was still there, but it no longer mattered. Her entire being had focused down to a single point of lethal concentration. She took her position, not any of the unconventional stances from before, but something even stranger. She lay at a 45-degree angle to the targets, a rifle canted in a way that would have failed any marksmanship course. Her breathing slowed until it was barely visible. The wind gusted and calmed, and still she waited. Cross found himself holding his breath. He had seen that position exactly 2 before, both times in classified training footage that was not supposed to exist. The Phantom Protocol, a shooting system developed for operators with specific injuries, designed to compensate for nerve damage while maintaining accuracy. But that program had been shut down in 2018. Then, between heartbeats, she fired. The bullet left Isabel's rifle with a whisper of displaced air, and for a moment that stretched like eternity, everyone on the range held their breath. Through his spotting scope, Hawthorne tracked the projectile's path, watching physics bend to the shooter's will. The first target punctured clean, the bullet's trajectory somehow maintaining true despite the impact. Then the second, a perfect hole appearing as if by magic. By the time it reached the 3rd target, logic said the bullet should have tumbled, destabilized, failed. Instead, it punched through dead center, leaving 3 perfectly aligned holes that looked like they had been drilled by a laser. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the wind seemed to pause in respect for what had just occurred. Hawthorne lowered his scope with shaking hands, his mouth working soundlessly as his brain tried to process the impossible. Around him, the other SEALs stood frozen, their earlier mockery evaporating like morning mist. "No way," Sullivan whispered, his arrogance crumbling. "That's not. Nobody can ... Phantom 7, Cross said quietly, and the words hit the group. Like a physical blow, Isabel's careful composure shattered. The rifle slipped from her nerveless fingers as her right hand began to shake violently. She crumpled forward, catching herself on her left arm as tears she had held back for years finally broke free. "I'm nobody," she gasped. Phantom 7 died. In Syria with her unit. I'm just what's left. The transformation in the SEALs was immediate and complete. where moments before had stood cocky operators amusing themselves at a civilian's expense, now stood warriors recognizing one of their own, worse, recognizing someone who had gone places and done things that even they could only imagine. Diaz dropped to one knee beside her, his earlier jokes forgotten. "Ma'am, we didn't know. I'm sorry." But Isabel was beyond hearing apologies. The dam had broken, and years of suppressed guilt came pouring out. "You want to know what happened to my hand? You want to know why the great Phantom 7 shakes like a leaf? Because I was too good. Too precise. Too perfect." She sat back on her heels, cradling her trembling right hand. April 15th, 2018. Operation Silent Storm. 8 of us, the best shooters from every branch. They called us Phantom Unit because we could reach out and touch someone from so far away they would never know we existed. Cross moved closer, his weathered face etched with understanding. The other SEALs formed a protective circle, their bodies blocking the view from the rest of the range. This was not entertainment anymore. This was a warrior's confession, sacred and terrible. "I was the youngest," Isabel continued, her gray eyes focused on something beyond the present. "The only one who had never seen combat before selection. But I could shoot. God help me, I could shoot better than anyone." Her scope had featured military-grade smart optics technology, professional thermal imaging, and ballistic calculation systems originally developed for special operations units. The advanced system could calculate wind drift, barometric pressure, even the Coriolis effect at extreme distances. It had made her the perfect shooter, able to place rounds with surgical precision at ranges that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. The target was Khalid al-Rashid, terrorist commander responsible for 3 embassy bombings. Intel said he would be in a compound outside Aleppo for exactly 1 hour, meeting with his lieutenants. We inserted at 0300, split into 2 elements, Overwatch and Entry. The words came faster now, as if speaking them quickly would lessen their weight. I was Overwatch with Phantom 1, positioned 1,200 yards out. The others, Rodriguez, Jackson, Kim, Torres, Washington, and Davies, they went in close. Sullivan found his voice. Standard protocol. Multiple angles, no escape routes. I had visual on al-Rashid through a window, clear shot. But Phantom 1 wanted to wait for the entry team to get in position. Isabel paused, lost in the memory. But I saw something else through that scope. A pressure tank, industrial size, right next to where al-Rashid was standing. The thermal showed it was full, probably propane for the comms generators. Hawthorne felt his stomach drop. He could see where this was going. The entry team was still 30 seconds out when al-Rashid started to move. He was leaving early. I called it in, and Phantom 2 Rodriguez came back immediately. "Take the shot, 7. We'll adapt." She gestured helplessly. So I did. 1 round, 1,208 yards, through a dirty window into a moving target. "You hit him," Hawthorne said quietly. A bitter laugh escaped her. "I hit him center mass. Textbook perfect." The hydrostatic shock knocked him back directly into that pressure tank. The bullet passed through him and punctured the tank. There must have been a pilot light or something nearby because the whole thing just ... She could not finish the sentence. She did not need to. "6 Kia," she whispered. "Rodriguez, Jackson, Kim, Torres, Washington, Davies. My friends, my family. Dead because I made the shot everyone said was impossible. Because I was too good to miss, too precise to just wound." The weight of her words settled over the group like a shroud. Every operator there had lost friends in combat, but this was different. This was a perfect shot that had become a perfect disaster. If I had been a fraction less perfect, if the bullet had hit him anywhere else, they would still be alive, Isabel continued, her voice raw, But I was Phantom 7. I didn't miss. I didn't wound. I killed. Cross's expression had gone stone cold. The after-action report. I remember hearing rumors. They said equipment failure, that the compound was rigged to blow. Command couldn't admit that their perfect sniper program had created a perfect disaster, Isabel said bitterly. They classified everything. Disbanded Phantom unit. Gave me a medical discharge with sealed records. The shrapnel in my hand. That's from trying to dig through the rubble afterward. Trying to find anything left of them. The doctors said the nerve damage was irreversible, that I would never shoot again. They were almost right. Almost? Diaz asked softly. Isabel flexed her trembling fingers. 3 months ago, I couldn't even hold a pencil. The rehab program, the biometric monitoring, the specialized positions you all mocked. They're all designed to work around the nerve damage. I'm relearning everything backwards, upside down, however I can make it work. Because I owe it to them. She touched her right hand to her heart. Rodriguez, Jackson, Kim, Torres, Washington, Davies. They're always with me. Every shot I take, I carry them. The confession hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. These men had seen war, had lost brothers in arms, but none of them had carried the weight of being directly responsible for their team's death. The guilt was written in every line of Isabel's face, carved deeper than any physical scar. It was Hawthorne who finally broke the silence. Ma'am, with respect, you followed orders. You couldn't have known about the tank. But I did know. The words tore from her throat. Part of me registered that tank, processed the danger. But I was so focused on making the perfect shot, so proud of my ability to hit exactly where I aimed. I could have shot him in the leg, the shoulder, anywhere that would have stopped him without that precise center mass hit. Cross studied her intently, seeing not just the broken warrior before him, but the implications of what she represented. How many people know you're alive? Officially? I'm Isabella Morrison, medical discharge, PTSD, and nerve damage. The real Phantom 7 is listed as Kier with the rest of her unit. She wiped her eyes with her left hand. It was easier that way. For everyone? But even as they spoke, none of them noticed the figure watching from the parking lot through high-powered binoculars. A man who had been searching for Phantom 7 for over 5 years, following rumors and ghost trails across 3 continents. Dmitry Volkov, former Spetsnaz, now freelance assassin, had finally found his target. And unlike the seals surrounding her, he knew exactly what Phantom 7 was capable of when she stopped holding back. The hunt was about to begin. 3 days after the shooting range incident, Isabel's carefully constructed anonymity began to crumble. It started small. A black sedan parked across from her apartment complex that had not been there before. A man in a coffee shop who looked away too quickly when she glanced in his direction. The feeling of being watched that made her skin crawl. With familiar dread, she had been Phantom 7, long enough to recognize the signs of a hunter closing in. The first concrete proof came when she arrived at the range that morning to find Crawford waiting for her, his weathered face grim with concern. In his hand was a manila envelope that looked like it had been delivered by someone who did not want to be seen. This was taped to my office door when I got in, he said without preamble. No postmark, no return address. Just your name written on the front. Inside was a single photograph, grainy, taken from a distance, but unmistakably her at the range 3 days ago. Written across the bottom in block letters was a message that made her blood run cold. Phantom 7, I know what you did in Syria. Time to pay. Crawford studied her reaction. Friend of yours? No, Isabel said quietly, though her hands had begun to shake more violently than usual. Definitely not a friend. What she did not tell him was that she recognized the handwriting. Dmitry Volkov had a very distinctive way of forming his letters. Too many years of Cyrillic muscle memory bleeding through into English script. She had seen it before, on mission. Briefings when he had been attached to international operations as a liaison. Back then, he had been Spetsnaz Sergeant Volkov, decorated sniper, consummate professional. Now he was something else entirely, a ghost who hunted ghosts, selling his skills to anyone with enough money and the right targets. Her secure phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Tell me you got that package and know what it means." The message was signed, Mansi, Master Chief Cross. She texted back, "I know exactly what it means. Need to talk." An hour later, she sat across from Cross in a secluded corner of a 24-hour diner, her coffee growing cold as she explained the history between her and the man hunting her. "Volkov was attached to our unit for Operation Silent Storm," she said, keeping her voice low despite the diner's emptiness. "Joint training exercise before the mission went live. He was supposed to provide intel on Russian weapons being used by all Rashid's forces." Cross leaned forward. "And he was al-Rashid's nephew." The words fell like stones into still water. "Not by blood. His sister married into the family when he was young. We didn't know. None of our intelligence had made the connection." The Master Chief's expression darkened. "So when you took out al-Rashid ... I killed his uncle. The man who took him in when his parents died, who taught him to shoot, who gave him purpose." Isabel stared at her reflection in the coffee cup. "After Syria, after the unit was disbanded, Volkov went freelance. Started hunting down everyone connected to Operation Silent Storm." "How many?" Cross asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected the answer. "Phantom 1 was found dead in his apartment in Virginia last year. Officially ruled a suicide. Single gunshot to the head. No signs of struggle. But I knew better. Volkov always makes it look clean." She pulled out her phone and showed him a news article. "Lieutenant Colonel James Peterson, decorated war hero. No history of depression or mental illness. His wife said he had been acting paranoid in the weeks before his death, claiming someone was following him." Cross studied the article. Why didn't Peterson reach out? Why not contact command? Because officially, Phantom Unit never existed. Peterson was just another intelligence officer who had a nervous breakdown and ate his gun. Who's going to believe stories about elite sniper units and Russian assassins seeking revenge? The implications hit Cross like a physical blow. "If he found you, then he knows I'm the one who pulled the trigger. The one who killed his family." Isabel's voice was steady, but her hands betrayed her fear. "He's been saving me for last. Taking out everyone else first. Making me watch. Making me know it's coming. We need to get you into protective custody," Cross said immediately. "Federal marshals, witness protection." "No." The word came out sharper than intended. "I won't spend the rest of my life running from this. And I won't put innocent people at risk because of my mistakes." Cross studied her across the table, seeing the same stubborn determination that had probably made her such an effective operator. "Then, what do you propose?" "Volkov has a pattern. He doesn't just kill his targets. He studies them first. Learns their routines, their weaknesses, their fears. Then he strikes when they're most vulnerable." She met his eyes. "But patterns work both ways. If I can predict his approach, I can be ready for him." "You're talking about using yourself as bait. I'm talking about finishing what started in Syria, one way or another." But even as she spoke, Isabel knew she was not telling Cross everything. The truth was worse than simple revenge. Volkov was not just hunting former Phantom Unit members, he was building something. Each kill had been more sophisticated than the last, more technically challenging. He was perfecting his craft, using her former teammates as practice for something bigger. and according to the intelligence chatter she had been monitoring through old contacts, that something bigger was happening soon. A high-value target was coming to San Diego for an international summit. Someone important enough that Volkov's employers would pay handsomely for a demonstration of his skills. The question was whether Isabel could stop him before he completed his collection of Phantom unit scalps and moved on to bigger game. Because if Volkov succeeded in killing her, she would not be the only one to die. The target he was really after would follow soon enough. Cross seemed to read something in her expression. There's more, isn't there? Something you're not telling. Emmy. She was saved from answering by the arrival of her secure phone's emergency alert tone. The message was brief but terrifying. Admiral Rebecca Torres arriving San Diego tomorrow for NATO summit. High-value target confirmed. Package delivery imminent. V. Admiral Torres. The woman who had authorized Operation Silent Storm. The commanding officer who had signed off on the mission that killed Volkov's uncle and Isabel's team. Volkov was not just hunting Phantom 7 anymore. He was completing his revenge against everyone who had taken his family from him, and Isabel was the only one who could stop him. Cross read the message over her shoulder, his face going pale. We need to contact base security immediately. Get Torres into a secure location. It won't matter, Isabel said quietly. Volkov's too good. If he wants Torres dead, security details won't stop him. They'll just give him more targets to practice on. Then, what do you suggest? She looked at him with eyes that had seen too much death, carried too much guilt. I suggest we give him what he really wants. A chance to face Phantom 7 one more time. Outside the diner, concealed in the shadows of the parking lot, Dmitry Volkov lowered his directional microphone and smiled. The conversation had gone exactly as he had hoped. Tomorrow, when Admiral Torres arrived for the summit, he would not just be eliminating a high-value target. He would be settling the last debt from Syria. Phantom 7 thought she could predict his pattern, use his methods against him. But she had forgotten one crucial detail about Spetsnaz training. Always have multiple extraction plans. By tomorrow evening, both Torres and the woman who had killed his uncle would be dead. And Dmitry Volkov would finally be able to close the book on the worst day of his life. The hunt was almost over. Admiral Rebecca Torres arrived at Naval Base San Diego at precisely 0800 hours, her security detail maintaining a protective formation that spoke of serious threats and classified intelligence. At 53, she carried herself with the bearing of someone who had spent 3 decades commanding respect in rooms full of men who thought women did not belong in uniform. Cross met her transport at the gate, his expression grim as he briefed her on the credible threat assessment. Ma'am, we have reason to believe there's an active sniper threat targeting your person. Someone with advanced training and a personal grudge. Torres listened without interruption as Cross outlined what they knew about Volkov, his connection to Phantom Unit, and his pattern of eliminating targets connected to Operation Silent Storm. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Phantom Unit, she said finally. I signed those orders. 8 of the best shooters we had ever trained, sent on a mission that should have been textbook simple. Her voice carried the weight of command decisions that had gone catastrophically wrong. 6 killed in action because of an impossible shot that worked too well. Yes, ma'am. And now the surviving member is offering to help stop Volkov. Torres's eyebrows rose. Phantom 7 is alive? Our intelligence said. Our intelligence was designed to protect her identity after the mission went sideways. Isabella Morrison, medical discharge, nerve damage from attempting to recover her team's remains. Cross handed her a classified file. She's been in rehabilitation for 5 years, trying to regain function in her shooting hand. The Admiral studied the file, her expression unreadable. And you trust her assessment of this threat? Ma'am, 3 days ago, I watched her put one bullet through 3 targets at 1,000 yards with a hand that shakes so bad she can barely hold a coffee cup steady. If anyone understands how Volkov thinks, how he operates, it's her. What Cross did not mention was the conversation he had had with Isabel the night before. She had called him at 0200 hours, her voice tight with controlled panic. "He's escalating," she had said without preamble. Volkov left another message at my apartment. Pictures of Torres arriving tomorrow, complete with timeline and security details. He wants me to know he's always one step ahead. Did you contact base security? What's the point? He's not coming through official channels. Volkov specializes in impossible shots from concealed positions. By the time security spots him, Torres will already be down. Cross had listened as she outlined her plan. Dangerous, probably suicidal, but with the kind of tactical brilliance that had made Phantom Unit legendary. "You sure about this?" "I'm sure that 6 of my friends are dead because I made a perfect shot at the worst possible moment. I won't let Torres join them." Now, standing in the morning sunlight as Admiral Torres reviewed the threat assessment, Cross wondered if he was making the right choice by trusting a broken sniper with PTSD and a personal vendetta. But the alternatives were worse. Conventional. Security had failed to stop Volkov before, and there was no indication it would succeed. Now Torres closed the file and looked at him directly. "Where's Phantom 7 now?" "Preparing her own security assessment, ma'am. She believes she can predict Volkov's approach vector and timing. I want to meet her." Cross hesitated. "Ma'am, she's not. She's carrying a lot of guilt about Syria. Seeing you might. Master Chief, I signed the orders that got her team killed. If she's willing to put her life on the line to protect mine, the least I can do is look her in the eye." 20 minutes later, they found Isabel on the roof of Building 7, the tallest structure on base with clear sight lines to the conference center where the NATO summit would be held. She had set up a complete surveillance station, high-powered spotting scopes, wind measurement devices, and detailed topographical maps, marked with elevation data and potential shooting positions. Torres climbed the access ladder with the steady movements of someone who had spent years on ship decks, but Cross could see her studying Isabel with the clinical assessment of a commanding officer evaluating an asset. What she saw was a young woman whose hand shook as she adjusted equipment, whose eyes carried the hollow look of someone who had seen too much death. "Phantom 7, Torres said simply. Isabel turned, and for a moment Cross thought she might salute out of ingrained habit. Instead, she just nodded. "Admiral, I'm sorry about your team having to deal with this threat. I'm sorry about yours having to die for my orders." The words hung in the air between them. 5 years of guilt and responsibility distilled into a single exchange. Isabel's composure cracked slightly, her right hand trembling more violently as she gripped the edge of the scope mount. "They were good people," she said quietly. "Rodriguez always made everyone laugh before missions. Jackson collected vintage postcards. Kim was teaching herself guitar. They had families, futures, dreams that ended because I was too precise with a rifle." Torres stepped closer, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to command decisions with life-or-death consequences. "They died because a terrorist used civilian infrastructure to hide behind. They died because war is ugly and complicated, and sometimes perfect shots have imperfect consequences. They did not die because you followed orders. With respect, Admiral, you weren't holding the rifle. No, I wasn't. But I was holding the responsibility for sending 8 of our best into harm's way based on intelligence. That missed a critical family connection." Torres gestured toward the maps and surveillance equipment. "Now tell me how we stop this." Isabel wiped her eyes and turned back to her planning materials, her voice becoming clinical and professional. "Volkov has 3 possible shooting positions. That gave him clear line of sight to the conference center. The water tower at grid reference 28-4-6-3-1, 1,400 yards out. The construction crane at the harbor, 1,600 yards southeast. And the communications tower on Coronado Bridge, 1,800 yards with elevation advantage. Cross studied the marked positions. That's a lot of ground to cover with security teams. We don't need to cover all of them, Isabel replied. Volkov has a signature. He always takes his kill shots at exactly 1,400 hours. Some kind of ritual from his Spetsnaz days. And he'll want me to know it's him, so he'll shoot from somewhere significant, somewhere connected to our history. Which position? The water tower? Same distance as my shot in Syria, same firing angle. He's not just killing Torres, he's recreating. The moment I killed his uncle, forcing me to watch helplessly as another commanding officer dies because of decisions I made. Torres listened to the tactical assessment with growing respect. Despite her obvious emotional trauma, Phantom 7 was thinking like the elite operator she had once been. What do you need from us? Time and distance. Volkov will expect security. Teams at the obvious positions, so he'll have escape routes planned. But if I can get into position first, if I can spot him before he takes the shot, you're talking about a counter-sniper operation with a hand that can barely hold a rifle steady. Cross pointed out. Isabel looked at him with eyes that had found some measure of peace in the prospect of action. My hand shakes, Master Chief, but my eye is still true, and my heart is still fighting for the right side. Sometimes that's enough. What none of them knew was that Dmitry Volkov had been listening to their conversation through a directional microphone positioned in a maintenance shed 800 yards away. The former Spetsnaz operator smiled as he confirmed what he had suspected. Phantom 7 was planning to face him directly. One sniper to another dot. It was exactly what he had hoped for. Torres would die at 1,400 hours as planned, but first he would deal with the woman who had destroyed his family. And this time, there would be no backup, no team to support her, no perfect shot to save the day. Just 2 snipers, 2 rifles, and 5 years of accumulated rage finally given voice. As Volkov began his own preparations, checking his custom rifle and calculating firing solutions, he allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Tomorrow would see the end of Phantom 7 and the completion of his revenge. The last debt from Syria would finally be paid in full. The hunt was about to become a war. At 0500 hours. While San Diego still slept under a blanket of marine layer fog, Isabel made her way to her chosen counter-sniper position. She had spent the night studying satellite imagery and wind patterns, calculating angles and distances with the methodical precision that had once made her the most feared shooter in the military. Her position was not one of the obvious choices. Instead of the water tower or construction crane that offered clear sight lines, she had selected an abandoned warehouse 700 yards from the conference center. The building's condemned status meant no civilian foot traffic, and its position offered concealment while maintaining visual contact with all 3 potential shooting positions she had identified. More importantly, it was a position Volkov would not expect. Too close for his usual preference for extreme distance shots, too exposed for someone seeking maximum concealment. But Isabel was not planning a standard counter-sniper operation. She was planning an ambush. Her rifle case contained more than just her customized precision weapon. Hidden beneath the foam padding were 6 special rounds, each one hand-loaded with unusual specifications. They looked like standard match-grade ammunition, but the projectiles had been modified with her own design. Hollow points filled with phosphorescent marking compound. If she missed Volkov with her first shot, the marking compound would create a visible trace that would reveal his belays. Exact position to the security teams converging on the area. It was insurance against the tremor in her hand, a way to ensure that even if she could not kill him, She could mark him for others to finish. The warehouse roof gave her a commanding view of the area, and as the morning fog began to lift, she could see the early preparation for Admiral Torres's arrival. Security teams were positioning themselves exactly where her intelligence had predicted, concentrated around the conference center itself, with mobile patrols covering the approaches. They were good, professional, thorough. But they were thinking like bodyguards, not like snipers. At 0800 hours, her secure phone buzzed with a message from Cross. Torres en route. ETA 20 minutes. All positions report ready. She texted back, in position. No visual on target yet. Maintain radio silence until 1400. But even as she sent the message, movement at the water tower caught her attention. Through her scope, she could see a figure in maintenance coveralls, climbing the access ladder with the fluid movements of someone in excellent physical condition. Too fluid for a civilian maintenance worker. Dmitry Volkov had arrived early. Isabel felt her heart rate spike as she tracked his ascent. He moved with the same careful precision she remembered from their joint training exercises, every motion economical and purposeful. At the top of the tower, he began setting up what appeared to be routine maintenance equipment, tools and cables that would provide perfect concealment for a sniper's nest. Through her scope, she could see him assembling his rifle with practiced efficiency. The weapon was a thing of beauty. Custom barrel, advanced optics, precision trigger system that probably cost more than most people's cars. It was the rifle of someone who took pride in his craft, who viewed killing as an art form requiring the finest instruments. For a moment, watching him work, Isabel felt a flash of professional admiration. Volkov was everything she had once been. Precise, dedicated, absolutely confident in his abilities. The only difference was that his precision was now focused on revenge rather than duty. She forced herself to focus on the tactical situation. Volkov was in position 4 hours early, which meant he was planning something more complex than a simple assassination. Professional snipers did not waste time in exposed positions unless they had multiple objectives. The realization hit her like ice water. Volkov was not just planning to kill Torres. He was planning to kill everyone connected to Operation Silent Storm who might be present for the Admiral's protection. Cross, the SEAL team members who had witnessed her shooting demonstration, possibly even Crawford from the range. He was planning a massacre, with Torres as the primary target and everyone else as a message to the intelligence community about the consequences of crossing the wrong people. Her secure phone buzzed again, this time with a number she did not recognize. Enjoying the view from the warehouse, Phantom 7? You always were predictable. Volkov had spotted her. The next message came immediately. 1400 hours. Torres dies first, then Cross, then you. Watch carefully. You're about to see what a perfect shot really looks like. Isabel's hands began shaking more violently than usual, the nerve damage aggravated by stress and adrenaline. She forced herself to take deep, controlled breaths, using the techniques her physical therapists had taught her to manage the tremors. Through her scope, she could see Volkov making subtle adjustments to his rifle, preparing for shots at multiple targets. His position at the water tower gave him clear line of sight, not just to the conference center, but to the security positions where Cross and his team would be stationed. She had to make a choice. Wait for him to take his first shot and try to stop him reactively, or take the initiative and engage him before he could begin his planned sequence of kills. The problem was distance and angle. 700 yards was well within her effective range under normal circumstances, but the water tower's elevation gave Volkov a significant tactical advantage. A miss would alert him to her exact position and probably result in her death within seconds, but a hit would end the threat permanently and save multiple lives. Isabel loaded one of her special rounds, the phosphorescent marking compound glinting slightly in the morning light. If she missed, at least the security teams would know exactly where the shots were coming from. At 13:55 hours, she watched through her scope as Admiral Torres's motorcade approached the conference center. The security detail moved with professional efficiency, scanning for threats, maintaining formation, doing everything right. Everything except looking up at the water tower, where death waited patiently for the perfect moment. Volkov's rifle swung toward the motorcade, his breathing slowing to the controlled rhythm of a sniper preparing to fire. Isabel could see his finger moving to the trigger, see him settling into the same focused concentration she knew so well. She had perhaps 10 seconds before he fired, 10 seconds to make a shot that would either save Admiral Torres's life and her own. 10 seconds to prove that sometimes, even with a broken hand and a shattered heart, Phantom 7 could still be perfect when it mattered most. Isabel closed her eyes for exactly 3 seconds, feeling the wind, calculating the distance, letting muscle memory and 5 years of painful rehabilitation guide her movements. When she opened them, her hand had found that momentary stillness between tremors. She fired. The bullet left Isabel's rifle, just as Volkov was settling into his final aim at Admiral Torres. Her shot, calculated for wind drift and elevation difference, struck his rifle scope dead center, sending a shower of glass and metal fragments into his face. The impact knocked his weapon sideways, his own shot firing wild into the concrete below the conference center. Volkov reeled back, blood streaming from cuts around his left eye, his position compromised and his primary weapon destroyed. But Dmitry Volkov had not survived 5 years as a freelance assassin by relying on single contingencies. Even as he staggered from the scope fragments, he was already reaching for his backup weapon, a compact sniper rifle designed for close quarters precision work. Through her scope, Isabel watched him swing the backup rifle toward her position. The muzzle flash bloomed like a deadly flower, and concrete exploded inches from her head as his return shot found the warehouse roof. "Sniper at the water tower." Cross's voice crackled through security channels as teams finally identified the threat. "All units converge on grid 28-4-6-3-1. But Volkov was already moving. Instead of trying to escape down the tower's access ladder, he did something that demonstrated exactly why he had been Spetsnaz elite. He rappelled directly off the platform using pre-positioned climbing gear, dropping toward ground level with controlled speed. Isabel tracked his descent through her scope, leading the target, compensating for his rate of fall. Her second shot took him in the left shoulder, spinning him sideways on the rope, but not stopping his descent. He hit the ground running, wounded but still functional, disappearing into the maze of maintenance buildings and utility structures surrounding the water tower. Behind him, security teams were converging from multiple directions, but Volkov had planned his escape routes as carefully as his attack. "Target is mobile and wounded," Isabel reported into her radio, "moving southeast toward the harbor. Be advised, he still has weapons and training." Admiral Torres had been rushed to safety the moment shots were fired, her security detail executing their emergency protocols with practiced efficiency. The immediate threat to her life was over, but Volkov remained dangerous as long as he was free. Cross's voice came through the radio. "Phantom 7, what's your status?" "Mobile and pursuing," she replied, already breaking down her position and preparing to move. "He's wounded, but not out. This isn't over." What Isabel did not tell Cross was that pursuing Volkov was exactly what he wanted her to do. She had disrupted his primary mission, but his secondary objective, killing Phantom 7, was still very much in play. The chase led through the industrial section of the naval base, past maintenance shops and storage facilities that provided perfect cover for a wounded sniper trying to evade pursuit. Isabel moved carefully, her rifle ready, knowing that Volkov could be waiting around any corner with his backup weapon. Her secure phone buzzed with a text. Message: Warehouse District Building 12. Come alone or I start killing civilians. The message included a photograph taken through a rifle scope. Two base maintenance workers going about their normal duties, completely unaware that they were being used as bait. Isabel found herself facing the same impossible choice she had confronted in Syria. Save innocent lives by taking a perfect shot, or watch helpless as others died because of her decisions. But this time, she was not the precise, confident sniper who had never missed a target. This time, she was a broken warrior whose hands shook, and whose perfect shots had already cost too many lives. Building 12 was a sprawling maintenance facility filled with heavy equipment and multiple levels, connected by catwalks and service platforms. Perfect terrain for a close-quarters sniper duel, with endless angles and concealment opportunities. Isabel approached the building with all the tactical awareness her training had drilled into her. Every window was a potential shooting position, every shadow a place where death might be waiting. Her hands trembled as she gripped her rifle, the nerve damage making precise movement difficult. "I'm here, Volkov," she called out as she reached the building's entrance. "Let the civilians go." His voice echoed from somewhere inside, distorted by the building's acoustics. "Phantom 7, you cost me my family, my purpose, my reason for living. Now I'm going to cost you yours. I followed orders, same as you would have done." "Orders?" His laugh was bitter, full of rage that had been building for 5 years. "You killed my uncle because you were too proud to wound him. Too perfect to leave anything to chance." She moved deeper into the building, using equipment and structural supports as cover. "Where are the civilians?" "Safe, for now. But their continued safety depends on you doing exactly what I tell you." The building's main floor was filled with heavy machinery, lathes, welding equipment, industrial tools that created a maze of potential hiding spots. Isabel advanced methodically, checking angles, listening for the subtle sounds that might betray Volkov's position. "You know what the worst part is?" His voice came from a different direction now, somewhere above her. "On the catwalks. I actually respected you. During training, I thought Phantom 7 was everything a sniper should be. Precise, dedicated, unstoppable." A shot rang out, striking the concrete floor inches from her feet. The muzzle flash had come from the second level, but by the time she swung her rifle toward the position, Volkov was already moving. "But you were just another American who thought precision was more important than wisdom," he continued, his voice echoing from yet another position. "You could have wounded my uncle, captured him alive, interrogated him for intelligence. Instead, you chose the perfect kill shot." Another shot, this time from her right flank. The bullet sparked off a metal support beam, sending fragments flying. Isabel rolled behind a drill press, her heart hammering as she tried to track his movement pattern. "The explosion wasn't your fault," she called out, hoping to keep him talking while she maneuvered for a better position. "You couldn't have, known about the propane tank, but I did know." The words came out as a roar of rage. "One provided intelligence on that compound. I told your team about the generator systems, the fuel storage, everything. But no one listened to the Russian observer." The admission hit Isabel like a physical blow. Volkov had tried to warn them about the dangers in the compound, but information had been overlooked or dismissed in the rush to take the shot. "If your people had listened to me, if they had trusted the intelligence I provided, 6 operators would still be alive, and my uncle would be in custody instead of dead." She could hear him moving again, his footsteps echoing through the building's metal framework. He was positioning himself for a final confrontation, choosing the ground where this 5-year hunt would end. "So here we are." His voice came from directly above her now, somewhere on the highest catwalk. 2 snipers, 2 rifles, and all the Ghosts between us. Let's see if Phantom 7's perfect shot can save her when it really matters. Isabel looked up through the building's industrial framework, searching for any sign of movement. Her hands shook violently now, the stress and adrenaline making the nerve damage worse than ever. But somewhere in the tremor, in the spaces between heartbeats, she could still find moments of perfect stillness. And sometimes that was enough. The final shot was about to be fired. The building fell silent except for the distant hum of industrial ventilation systems and the soft patter of rain that had begun to fall on the metal roof. Isabel crouched behind the drill press, her rifle steady despite the tremor in her hands, scanning the catwalks above for any sign of movement. "You want to know something funny, Phantom 7? Volkov's voice drifted down from somewhere in the maze of overhead platforms. "Your team talked about you during the briefings. Rodriguez said you were the best natural shooter she had ever seen, but you second-guessed every shot that wasn't perfect." Isabel felt tears stinging her eyes at the mention of Rodriguez. Her former teammate had been right. She had always been obsessed with perfection, unable to accept that sometimes good enough was actually better than flawless. "They cared about you," Volkov continued, and there was something different in his voice now. Less rage, more sadness. "Even knowing you would probably outlive them all because of your skill. They cared about the young sniper who carried pictures of her family and wrote letters home every night." A piece of metal creaked overhead, and Isabel caught a glimpse of movement on the highest catwalk. Not enough for a shot, just the suggestion of a figure repositioning for what would likely be the final exchange. "I know they cared," she called back. "That's what makes this so hard. They died because I was exactly what they trained me to be." "No." Volkov's voice was closer now, maybe 30 feet above and to her left. "They died because war is chaos, and even perfect soldiers cannot control every variable. You think I don't understand guilt, Phantom 7? I lost my family too." The admission hung in the air between them, heavy with 5 years of accumulated grief. Isabel realized that Volkov was not just hunting her for revenge. He was hunting her because killing Phantom 7 was the only way he could think of to end his own pain. "Your uncle chose his path," she said softly. "He chose terrorism, chose to hide behind civilian infrastructure, chose to put innocent people at risk. You didn't choose that for him. And your team chose to follow orders, chose to trust their training, chose to serve their country. You didn't choose their deaths." The parallel was exact and devastating. Two soldiers, two sides of the same coin, both carrying guilt that belonged to war itself rather than to their individual actions. "I've been thinking about this for 5 years, Volkov said, and Isabel could hear him moving again, getting into position for his final shot. "Imagining this moment, planning exactly how I would kill the woman who destroyed my family. But now, Now, I think maybe we've both been carrying the wrong ghosts." A single shot rang out, the sound echoing through the building's metal framework. But the bullet did not come toward Isabel. Instead, it struck the wall beside one of the upper windows, a deliberate miss that spoke volumes. "I could have killed you 12 times since you entered this building," Volkov said quietly. "Your hand shakes, your movement patterns are predictable, and you're fighting in my chosen terrain. But killing you won't bring back my uncle. It won't bring back your team." Isabel remained in position, not trusting the apparent ceasefire. "Then what do you want?" "I want to stop carrying their deaths like a cross. I want to remember my uncle as the man who taught me to shoot, not as the terrorist who died in an explosion. I want you to remember your team as the warriors who trusted you, not as the victims of your perfect shot." Slowly, carefully, Volkov began to descend from the catwalks. His rifle was slung across his back, his hands visible and empty. The left side of his face was still streaked with blood from the scope fragments, But his expression was no longer filled with rage. When he reached the main floor, he stopped about 20 feet from Isabel's position. Up close, she could see the toll that 5 years of hunting and killing had taken on him. He looked older than his actual age, worn down by grief and the weight of actions that could never be undone. The civilians? She asked, were never in danger. Empty threat to get. You hear? He managed a tired smile. I am many things, Phantom 7, but I am not a murderer of innocents. They stood facing each other in the industrial gloom. Two broken warriors who had traveled different paths to the same destination. Outside, she could hear security teams surrounding the building, but no one was rushing in. Cross was smart enough to let this play out naturally. What happens now? Isabel asked. Volkov considered the question. Now I disappear. Find a new name, a new purpose. Maybe try to build something instead of just destroying. The hunt is over. Phantom 7. 4. Both of us. He turned to leave, then paused. Your team would be proud of you. What you've overcome, what you've rebuilt from nothing. That shock you made to save Admiral Torres. Rodriguez always said you would be there when it mattered most. How did you? Isabel began, then stopped. Of course, he had been monitoring their communications, planning around their security measures. You could have killed Torres easily. Could have. Chose not to. Revenge against one terrorist's niece seemed less important than letting 6 brave operators rest in peace. As Volkov walked toward a service exit, Isabel called after him. Dmitri. Your uncle, what was he like before the war? He stopped without turning around. He taught physics at Moscow University. Had 3 daughters who adored him. Collected vintage cameras and took pictures of birds. His voice was soft with memory. He was a good man who made very bad choices when his world fell apart. I'm sorry for your loss, and I'm sorry for yours. Then he was gone, disappearing into the rain and mist like the ghost he had always been. Isabel remained in position until Cross and his security team entered the building. Their weapons drawn, but their expressions confused by the absence of bodies or ongoing gunfire. Status report? Cross asked. Threat neutralized, Isabel replied, though the words felt inadequate to describe what had actually happened. Volkov is gone. The hunt is over. Later that evening, as the rain continued to fall over San Diego, Isabel sat in the same beachside cafe where she had shared coffee with the SEAL team days earlier. Her hand still shook as she raised her cup, but the tremor felt different now. Less like damage and more like a reminder that she was still alive, still fighting, still serving. Admiral Torres had insisted on a personal debrief, listening with the focused attention of a commanding officer, as Isabel described the confrontation in the warehouse. When she finished, Torres was quiet for a long moment. You could have killed him, the Admiral finally said. Had clear shots, perfect opportunity. Why didn't you? Isabel thought about Rodriguez, about Jackson and Kim, and the others who would. Never sit in cafes or watch sunsets or write letters home. Because I've made enough perfect shots, Admiral. Sometimes mercy is more precise than a bullet. Torres nodded slowly. What will you do now? Keep shooting. Keep serving. Keep carrying them with me. She touched her right hand to her heart. Rodriguez, Jackson, Kim, Torres, Washington Davies. They're always with me, but now they're not weights anymore. They're wings. The sun was setting over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold that seemed to bleed into the ocean itself. For the first time in 5 years, watching those colors, Isabel did not think of Syrian deserts or the bitter taste of cordite. She thought of 6 friends who had trusted her completely, and of the Russian sniper who had finally chosen to lay down his burden of revenge. She thought of second chances and the possibility that even broken things could find new purpose. Her secure phone buzzed with a message from Cross. Range time tomorrow at 0600. Team wants to see if you can do that 3-target trick again. She smiled and texted back, "See you there. Bring extra coffee. My hands still shake." As darkness fell over the water, Isabel Morrison, former Phantom 7, current guardian of ghosts, perpetual student of redemption, finished her coffee and headed home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to serve, new chances to prove that sometimes the most perfect shot is the one you choose not to take. The ghost would always be with her, but they were no longer pulling her down into darkness. Instead, they were lifting her up towards something she had thought lost forever in a Syrian compound 5 years ago. Hope. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.